There is a specific kind of silence that settles over a kitchen table late at night when the checkbook is open and the house is quiet. It is the silence of a generation that did everything right, yet finds itself standing on shifting sand. If you are over 45, you likely remember a time when the American dream had a predictable price tag. You worked, you saved, and eventually, the home you lived in became your greatest financial fortress. But as we move through 2026, that fortress is beginning to feel more like a gilded cage. We were told that what goes up must come down, that the feverish housing prices of the early 2020s were a bubble waiting to burst, and that if we just waited long enough, the market would return to some semblance of sanity. Yet, here we are. The crash that was promised hasn't arrived, and the uncomfortable truth is that it might not be coming at all. We are witnessing a fundamental restructuring of American shelter, where the middle class is being squeezed between high interest rates that refuse to plummet and home values that have effectively plateaued at record highs. This is not just a market cycle, it is a permanent shift in how wealth and housing intersect in this country. If you find this deep dive into the mechanics of our economy helpful, I invite you to join our community by subscribing. We focus on providing clear, grounded analysis for those navigating their peak earning years and retirement planning in these uncertain times. To understand why prices aren't dropping, we have to look past the headlines and into the structural deficit of the American home. For decades, we simply did not build enough. We are currently facing a shortage of millions of housing units, and while developers are active, they are building for the middle class. They are building high-end luxury estates or build-to-rent communities backed by institutional capital. This creates a floor for prices that simple supply and demand charts cannot fully explain. Even with mortgage rates hovering around 6%, the inventory remains historically low. Why? Because of the lock-in effect. Millions of Americans are sitting on 3% mortgages they secured years ago. For them, moving doesn't just mean a new zip code, it means doubling their monthly interest expense for a potentially smaller home. This has effectively frozen the secondary market, which is the lifeblood of middle-class mobility. When the supply of existing homes vanishes, the remaining inventory becomes a luxury good, regardless of its actual condition. This leads us to an insight that many mainstream analysts tend to overlook: the death of the starter home. In previous generations, the housing ladder was a real thing. You bought a small bungalow, built equity, and traded up. Today, that ladder has been pulled up. The price of an entry-level home has risen so far above median wage growth that the very concept of a starter home is becoming obsolete. For those over 45, this creates a unique pressure. You may have the equity, but where do you go? Downsizing has become more expensive than staying put. The small, manageable retirement condo now costs more than the 4-bedroom family home did 15 years ago. We are seeing a massive wealth transfer, but it is not moving from one generation to the next. It is moving from the middle class to the costs of maintenance, property taxes, and insurance premiums, which, in 2026, are rising faster than general inflation. If you appreciate this level of candor and want to stay ahead of the shifts affecting your financial security, please consider subscribing to the channel. Your support allows us to keep producing these in-depth reports without the need for sensationalism. The logic of the 2006 market is driven by a new reality. Housing is no longer just shelter. It is a hedge against a devaluing currency. As inflation remains sticky, particularly in the services and insurance sectors, hard assets like real estate are where capital goes to hide. This is why institutional investors continue to buy, even at these prices. They aren't looking for a quick flip. They are looking for long-term yields in a world where the purchasing power of the dollar is under constant assault. For the average American family, this means you are no longer just competing with the couple down the street. You are competing with a hedge fund's algorithm. This structural change explains why a traditional crash is unlikely. A crash requires forced sellers, but with most homeowners sitting on massive amounts of equity and low fixed rates, there is no wave of foreclosures on the horizon. Instead of a bang, we are getting a long, slow grind. The practical implication for your retirement is profound. If your plan relied on selling your home to fund your later years, the math has changed. You might find that your home is worth a fortune, but the cost of living somewhere else, or even renting, will consume that equity faster than you anticipated. We are moving into an era of the Great Stay, where aging in place is no longer a choice, but a financial necessity. This requires a complete reevaluation of how we manage debt and liquidity in the final decade before retirement. The stability we once took for granted now requires a more aggressive, informed approach to asset protection. As we look toward the remainder of the decade, the housing market will likely remain in this state of suspended animation, unaffordable for the young and inescapable for the old. It is a quiet crisis, one that doesn't make for explosive news cycles, but erodes the foundation of the middle class every single month. It forces us to ask what a home is actually worth when it becomes a barrier to our freedom, rather than a bridge to it. We must find ways to adapt to this high-cost environment without sacrificing our peace of mind. Thank you for spending your time with us today. If you found value in this perspective, please subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments below. It is a journey we are all navigating together, and the first step towards security is understanding the world as it is, not as we wish it to be. Sleep well, but stay vigilant.